Thank you, Anita. I never miss an opportunity to tout poetry because it's one of my, and sometime I may give you a report on what I call the 4 invisible horsemen of the apocalypse. We're all worried about the visible, tangible horsemen of the apocalypse that will cause terrible damage to many people. But we're supposed to worry about the future, and I worry even more about the horsemen we can't even see and can't identify. One I talked about yesterday is a monoculture that could lead to a culture that is not able to respond to the challenges of survival. And there's a lot that goes into this. Another one I'm worried about is the denigration of language and the lack of poetry in our society. We spend trillions and trillions of dollars every year on technology, and we can't support one single poet on this planet. The only one I know of who was supported was Rod McEwen for a while because he sang songs like Jack does. And yet all of our values that we live by and that inspire us to care about, to be our brother's keeper, or to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. All of the great abstractions, love, beauty, truth, goodness, have come from poets. Jesus was a poet. He always talked in little short proverbial statements of Beatitudes, parallelism, David, Moses, Muhammad, Buddha, the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Lao Tzu, Confucius. They all spoke in poetry. And now we don't honor poetry at all. What is going to happen? Why did they speak in poetry? Because number one, in poetry, you can use all of the resources of language. You're not limited just to the rational, logical functions. You can do the both and that Ed is talking about, and which is almost always the solution. And doesn't have to be 50-50. One side can be 100% right, and the other side can be 100% right, and you still get 100%, or 80 plus 80. Poetry can do this. It can talk about paradoxes. It can be illogical. Like Emerson, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. It can be inconsistent. It uses the rhythm, the sound of language, which is very powerful. It's penetrating. That's why Jack puts poetry to music. It penetrates and it motivates. And above all, poetry is out of the box all the effing time. It is by nature out of the box. Not only the whole poem has to be original and out of the box, the concept, but every line, every word, every image has to be unique and original, or you're just a copycat. You're just Mary had a little lamb, blah, 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 blah. So it teaches us to think outside the paradigm at every step of the way. And that we need more than anything right now. I want to piggyback on Ed's concern about runaway consumerism and materialism with a little poem that came out of my experience in Africa. And I was always impressed, coming from a culture that is distracted from distraction by distraction, as T.S. Eliot puts it, and that has movies and opera and radio and TV and DVD and one distraction after another, and still everybody ends up being bored, going to the next more shocking episode so they can be jolted out of their ennui. And here's the village in Africa where they don't have any radio, they don't have any movies, they don't have any of that. And life repeats itself over and over, and yet there was a great deal of satisfaction. I didn't see anybody going to the shrink or committing suicide. There are a few loonies, but it's very rare in Africa, and yet they don't have any of these distractions. They don't go to the shopping mall and buy stuff all the time. They don't have any money. So this is a poem about that kind of simple life, celebrating that kind of simple life. It's called In the Village. And it was first published in the New Yorker, and then now in the book that the UN put up. In the village. In the village, in the village, in the village, life repeats itself. Life repeats itself. There is sunlight. There is darkness. The dark repeats itself. The light repeats itself. Yet, life is never dull. It pats the drum hide of the night and is satisfied. It listens for footfalls when the dogs bark in the village, in the village, in the village. In the village, in the village, in the village, life repeats itself, life undoes itself, and then does itself up in the same guise. We are careful not to fail to repeat the same salutations, the same farewells our parents and our parents' parents use. They are wise, we are small and the day long. Death comes but once, but when it comes to life, no one would be unwilling to repeat in the village, in the village, in the village.